So welcome to our third class. Today's class is on Nakshatras, and what we're going to be doing today is that I'm hoping all of you have kind of watched that first tape. I'm going to go through the main points of it pretty quickly because Nakshatras really should be about an 8-lesson course, and I'll probably do an 8-lesson course next spring because I'm totally fascinated by Nakshatras. There's so much material and so much time that we could spend on it. So this is kind of a survey course. So we're kind of giving you 2 lessons, and one of them's kind of happening because I had a videotape I did on my transit course on Nakshatras, and hopefully, let me know how many did everybody watch that, because I really kind of gave you 2 weeks to watch it, and then I kind of reminded you yesterday. So hopefully everybody watched the first tape on Nakshatras. Can you let me know in the chat room, which is privately private, if you were able to watch the Nakshatra tape, or just let me know. I guess I really need to know because I don't want to rush through it if you didn't have time to watch it. I'm not quite sure what to do if you haven't seen it. Good, Daniel. I'm glad you got to see it. And I totally get it. I was a college student, and what happens is, sometimes there's just not enough time to get all your homework in before the class starts, and you hope you'll get something out of the class by just coming. And I've kind of reminded you, the more you can put into the class before the class starts, the better. So, good. Bernard, you're going to have to mute yourself because we're recording. So if you have background noise, if you have music or the TV on in the background, please mute yourself. Otherwise, the whole class hears it. It'll be in the recording. So it's really important. You've got the mute controls here, and at the moment I've muted you all to keep out the noise. But let's start by chanting, and I'll mute you at different times. Good, Pinar. I'm glad you got to see it. So at least I know 3 people have seen it. Okay, so again, that's my contact information for those of you. I do post daily on Facebook, on Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, on my name. My website, I have daily posts too. We have a class website too, which I put most of you on. I haven't put the new people on yet. Vedic Astrology classes by Barry Rosen. So you can ask to be part of the Vedic Astrology classes by Barry Rosen. I'll put you to that class. It's a good place to discuss stuff with your other classmates, to ask me questions. You can always email me questions also. I do respond well to text on Facebook, as many of you know. I do not respond very well to my phone, so don't expect an answer back there. I just don't like my phone. So let's start by invoking Ganesha. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us be together, let us eat together, let us be vital together, let us be radiating truth, radiating the light of life. Never shall we denounce anyone, never entertain negativity. So also, good thing for a Jyotishi to always be kind of neutral, even about politics. I mean, everybody wants to drag me into their I hate Donald Trump energy, and I really try to stay out of it because I need to be neutral. He's our president. We have to support him, whatever I may think of him. So it's just... it's important to kind of be neutral as a Jyotishi. So welcome Pinar. Pinar is in the far left, coming to us from Turkey. It's about 10:30 there, I think. Nicole in London, a beautiful lotus. Vina is not here yet. I don't know if she's coming today. She's in Maui. She's a wonderful artist. You see her jewelry on her neck. Christina is in the Philippines. Is never with us because of the time zone. We have a new lady in the class who's not yet with us, Jamie Bateman. Lives in Colorado. Maybe she'll join us in a few minutes. Sonaral is joining us from Mumbai with her boyfriend. And Daniel in London. And Catherine is traveling today. She's in Alberta. She's going to visit her mom. She said she's going to try to sneak in over the phone. When you are traveling, go to meeting does work on your cell phones. And I've had to do classes like that. I've listened to classes. You're waiting in the airport and you put on your headset and you can listen to the whole class and you can see the screen too. So quite wonderful. Helen is not joining us. She's working on some big projects and she's going to be watching the tapes. Vina is here now. Vina has arrived, so let's show her picture again. Okay, Vina, you're here. It's good. And we have a new lady with us, Rashmi from Seattle. She's an artist. She does Deva paintings of Mother Divine, and there's one of her paintings very beautiful behind her, and she's kind of a shining light. She's joining the class today. Okay, so our class goes through September 10th. This week we're going to start Navamamsha just a little bit, and our focus this class stays on Nakshatra, but as I said, a lot of the classes kind of bleed together. So by the time we finish our class on August 13th, we'll kind of be caught up, completing Navamamsha, and then the Karakamsha chart is the rotated Navamamsha chart. So it's another level of Navamamsha. So we're really going to have like 3 classes on Navamamsha and the rotations of it. So that's what we're going to be doing during the next 3 weeks. It'll be important within a couple weeks to watch the Jiminy tapes that I sent you, and I'll send them again if you haven't watched them. Our fall class is on understanding money karma and its remedies as personal finance for your life. It's a 9-week class actually. We'll go most of the fall. Everybody in the fall thinks about money, and the squirrels are hiding away their acorns for the winter, so doing a money course. I'm going really deep with it. I've done a few of these already. This one is going to actually be more than astrology, because they're going to bring in some of the money experts, Catherine Ponder and Reverend Ike, and some other great people who've done a lot of great work on what blocks our money from manifesting, and then we'll combine that with astrology. So a very exciting class. It's early bird special through August 15th, which is not listed there. I did put up my winter course. It's on my website. It's a course on hidden psychological patterns, moving beyond mental blocks and karma. It's kind of a part 2 course to the astrology, the Schools of Karma class that I did last spring. I'm kind of excited about it. Sonaral inspired me to do it. So I'm going to go really deep into kind of the astrology of the mind. And there are a lot of hidden things in the astrology of the mind that we're going to look at that are a little bit more advanced, things that are called Bhattaka, the Upagrahas. There are planets like Ulaka and Mandi that cause paranoia and hidden psychological blocks. There are other psychological issues that affect our houses based on what day of the week we're born. Those are called Dagda Rashis. We look again at Argala in more detail. I'll actually get to teach it to you and show you how it's an architect for the mind. So we're going to go a little bit deeper. For those of you who are interested in that class, you can, it starts in January. You've got time. If you're not doing the money course, you can purchase the Astrology of Karma course and get ready for that class. You don't have to have taken it, but it's kind of a natural predecessor. Those of you like conferences, I'll be in Sedona in November. We're working with Parashara's Light, the software company, and we're going to put on a webinar and have some great teachers from all over the world in February. I'll give you more details as that comes out. And then big Western Vedic Astrology Conference, United Astrology Conference. I think 1,800 astrologers come to that conference. It's absolutely huge. There's a Vedic track, and I'll be speaking on the Vedic track. Okay, so let's move to a review of the Nakshatras. So I'm going to go through this material quickly. It seems like most of you had a chance to watch it. And if you didn't, you don't have to feel guilty. It's kind of, I'm not, luckily I'm not going to give you an F in this class. And we're all busy. We work and we have mothers and we have all kinds of responsibilities. But in this case, I wanted to do 2 lessons on Nakshatras, and so because I had a videotape, which was an introduction to them, it was a way of getting through the material, doing 2 lessons on Nakshatras in one. So that's kind of what we're going to do. So we're going to go quickly and review the questions, the Nakshatra material from the first tape, and then we'll get much deeper today. So one of the things I encourage you to do, and I really want to encourage you to do this, is to start making flashcards. There's 27 nakshatras. You can make 27 flashcards. And start memorizing their names, what planet owns them, what their Shakti is, what deity is connected to them, kind of their numbers. There's a number sequence into them that helps you know them. All the K2 nakshatras, they're all 9 from each other. So K2, K2 is 1, 10, 19. Venus is 2, 11, 20. So start, the numerology is important actually. You should kind of know their locations, what they're in, whether they're Rajasic, Tamasic, or Sattvic, and we'll be understanding. I think it's really important. I sent you actually an amazing Excel spreadsheet of the nakshatras. I suggested that you get it printed at a printer. It was very hard to kind of create, and actually when I printed it out, it ended up being like 17 by 24 inches pages, and then it kind of prints kind of nicely. So you may have to reformat it or work with your printer, but it's really kind of nice to have it all in one place, because it, in that chart it shows you, everything that you need to know. You can put it all on flashcards too. It also has professions and auspicious activities. But nakshatras are very powerful. We started out thinking about the signs, and it took us a while to learn the signs. And the nakshatras are much more refined information, and we want to take the time to learn them. You all should have really good books on nakshatras. Bill Sutton's book I use almost every day, the nakshatras. It's particularly good if you want to look up what it means when Mercury is in Ashwini Nakshatra, what that combination means. Or, and she also has it by padas. So there's four segments to each nakshatra that are the Navamamshas. So that's a particularly good book to have. Parash Trivedi's book is much better. It's called The 27 Celestial Portals. It's an absolutely brilliant book, and if you only had to buy one, I would buy that one. Dennis Harness also has a book on nakshatras. I sent you his article. And then Raman's book on electoral astrology tells you about when to use a nakshatra for starting something auspicious. So what we're starting to do is that we want to get more microscopic in our Vedic astrology. When we first read the newspaper and we read our sun sign, we're Libra, and we read what they said about Libra, it's pretty superficial. But, astrology is like strands of DNA. There's a sign, there's a house, there's a nakshatra, there's a part of the nakshatra, which is 3 degrees and 20 minutes. There's a deity at every half degree, and each part gives us some meaning, and then the combinations and the relationships give us really kind of great depth of meaning. So that's kind of what we're starting to move towards, get more microscopic, because we can be very specific, with any placement. It's not, my goal is to kind of make you very deep and not superficial, saying, oh, Mars in Aries, I mean, you're a warrior or something, but that doesn't mean anything. Like for me, I've got Mars in Aries in the 6th house, and Bharani Nakshatra and in the Virgo Pada, which, all those pieces tell you something about the person. This is something I think is very powerful. It's just something I've just recently kind of been spending more time with, is the Shakti of the Nakshatra. So when a planet is in the Nakshatra, it kind of activates that energy. And I think putting the Shakti on your flashcards is really important, because Ashwini, the first nakshatra of the zodiac, which is 0 to 1320, the power to heal, reaching one's goals, the quick starter. I mean, if you can just get down 2 or 3 words for each nakshatra, when you start looking at somebody's chart quickly, they'll come to you. And again, I think you just have to take time to memorize. I sent you Dennis's article. You've got the slideshow. There's no point in us going over these. You just need to memorize them. So one of the things to realize about the order of the nakshatras is that, again, they have these numerical relationships. It's important to know the numbers, because they're often kind of referred to as in a number, and so the way to remember that, you just add 9 to the beginning. So Ashwini is the first nakshatra, plus 9 is number 10, which is Magha, and plus 9 is Mula. So every 9, you repeat with a Ketu nakshatra. Every 9 you complete with a Venus nakshatra, and then they go in order of Rajas, Tamas, Sattva. Aries, Rajas is that which wants to be active. Tamas wants to kind of materialize, and Sattva is more pure and represents goodness. And so the first 9 nakshatras are Rajasic, the second 9 are Tamasic, the third are Sattvic. And then the deities are really important. And again, I'll do a whole lesson on deities if I do a nakshatra class. But take the time to kind of learn the mythology. It's quite fascinating. It's quite revealing. When you understand the mythology, you start understanding what that nakshatra means for that placement. And the deity is actually more important than the chart lord, so the nakshatra lord. So Pusha is considered the most auspicious nakshatra. It's in Cancer from 320 to 1640. It's owned by Saturn. Now, so you would think, okay, Saturn is, pretty dull and it makes you work hard. But the deity of Brihaspati, the deity of Pusha is Brihaspati. He's the counselor of the gods. He's connected to Jupiter. And so really Pusha is more a very lively, auspicious Jupiterian nakshatra. My wife has that nakshatra, and she's an amazing teacher. And she's a hard worker too. But you kind of want to, again, learn the deities. And again, I don't want to spend my time doing this. I'll do that in my nakshatra class, but I think it's worth learning them. The nakshatras have certain qualities too. I mean, there's fixed ones, soft ones, light ones, sharp ones. I went over this in the videotape, but it's important to kind of remember that some of the nakshatras are kind of dreadful. Bharani, Magha, Purvashada, Purvabhadrapada. They're really used for starting nefarious schemes. You have to remember that, because they're kind of really kind of darker energy. Pusha is the most auspicious. And then what we're going to talk a lot about today is the connections of the nakshatras and the Navamamshas to the 4 aims of life, which are connected to the earth. So each nakshatra has 4 padas, right? and they go in order. If you start from Ashwini, the first one, it starts with the fire sign. So fire is protecting, right? Then it moves into an earth sign, Taurus Navamsha. Taurus is dealing with the material. And then it moves into Gemini. Now, the fourth pada of Ashwini is Gemini. And that is connected to relating, communicating, providing service. And then the fourth nakshatra, the fourth pada in the nakshatra is a water sign, and that's connected to teaching, coaching, and spiritual initiation. So when we start looking at the Navamsha chart, you have to start thinking that if somebody has Venus in a water sign like Cancer, like it's in Pisces Navamsha, which is where it's exalted, or it's in Scorpio Navamsha, there are certain qualities that it has. It connects Venus to kind of teaching. Venus is always connected to teaching anyway. It's one of the guru planets. It teaches about the material. But so there are kind of very specific microscopic details, and you can get these from the books, and we'll spend a little time on that next week. So the big thing that I wanted you to understand about the nakshatras is this idea. I'm using the word channeling. I don't really know what other word to use. Is that nakshatra kind of this is the main point of the first tape and what we want to get out of this first lesson. The ruler of the Rashi manages the material world, and the nakshatra governs the mentality of the planet. So we'll have to talk about this in terms of examples in a minute. But the sign is actually more connected to the material. And when we start doing Rashi dashas, which are dashas that connected to signs, you can project somebody's material world with the signs more easily than you can with Vimshotri dasha, which predicts more the mentality of the planet, because the Vimshotri dasha is connected to the nakshatras and to the mentality. So it's quite fascinating. So we want to think the whole purpose of this lesson is that nakshatras are mental and they influence how we think about something. And Rashis are more material, and they relate more to the material world. And the moon, which represents the mind, goes through each nakshatra every day. So it changes our mental energy and picks up the energy of each lunar mansion every day. So it's channeling different planets every day through the nakshatras, and it's channeling the nakshatra, the qualities of those nakshatras also. But when we look at a natal chart, and we're going to practice now for about 10 or 15 minutes on your charts, we're going to learn a lot about how the quality of the material is influenced by the mental. So before I practice on your chart, let me unmute you and take questions on that first tape. So again, some of you have more experience with nakshatras than others. I know a lot of the basic classes are not teaching nakshatras, and so this may be your first exposure to them. So that's why I gave you that videotape. So questions in general about that first tape, and we'll practice on your charts.
Hi, Barry. I had a question regarding the importance of the deities. It sounds a bit abstract because you have Brihaspati, or you have Indra, or you have the Ashwinis, and I don't know how you can sort of calibrate them, or are we supposed to sort of symbolically unpack them? I'm a bit confused about their relevance.
Yeah, I need to do a whole 2-hour lesson on that. But I mean, if you get Prash Trivedi's book, he has like 2 or 3 pages on each nakshatra and their deity and the deities and the mythology of the deities and how to translate that. And so, like, Indra's the king of the gods, and so you get, Indra has a big, and in some ways the king of the gods has a big ego, right? And so, in a sense, like Donald Trump has his moon, ingestia, um, and somebody you have to mute yourself. I'm getting somebody's music in the background. Um, and it's really more so. It bothers me, but it also bothers the people who are listening to the tape in the future. So Donald Trump has the moon in Gestia, and Gestia is the king of the gods, and it gives Donald a lot of power, which obviously he's become one of the most powerful people in the world now as president of the United States. But there's a kind of a weakness in that power too. That's kind of very subject to kind of fall. So when you read the mythology of Indra and how Indra fell, and you see that Donald Trump has his moon in Gestia, and Saturn's going over his natal moon, and it's all connected to Indra, you start kind of being able to kind of like extrapolate some of it into people's lives. And to do it, it takes a lot of practice, but Prash Trivedi gives a lot of examples of how to do it in his book. And then, I think sometime if we do a Nakshatra class, we'll definitely do a whole 2-hour session on it. But I can't, I think it's really important, and yet I can't really spend the time today on it. But definitely, if you want to know about it, you just have to read. You have to read. You have to read something Prash Trivedi's books or get books on Vedic mythology. But it all translates into psychology. They didn't have psychology in ancient times, and so it was like they told the psychology through story of the mythology. If you read Joseph Campbell and all these people, I'm totally fascinated by psychology and mythology, and they come together in a Vedic way also. So it's quite fascinating.
Thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so let's practice a little bit on nakshatras. Here, some of the general rules about nakshatras is you have to judge the strength of the nakshatra ruler. Okay, and I have 2 slides on this actually in the part 2. The nakshatra, there's this rule that we've learned before, which is about the dispositor. So if if your moon is in Capricorn and Saturn's let's say your moon's in Aquarius and Saturn's in Capricorn, then the dispositor of the moon is in the 12th house, and it causes much, even though it's his own sign, it causes more problems. It causes the moon is connected to the dispositor. It's connected to the 12th house. If the moon is in the 9th house in Libra, or the 10th house, let's say you're in Aquarius moon and moon's exalted in Libra, then the dispositor is in the 10th house, and it supports an illustrious career because the dispositor is exalted in the 10th house. So the dispositor in the rising sign is very important, and this also applies to the nakshatra. So if the nakshatra lord's in a good house, 1, 4, 5, the Kendra or the Trikona houses, then it's strong. If the nakshatra is in 6, 8, or 12, then there's a problem. So you have to see where the nakshatra ruler is placed. Is it connected to dignity? Is it affected by yogas? And so there are all these kind of rules for nakshatras. We need to practice this, and I'm going to. It's kind of abstract. Let's go to your charts and to my chart. I may start with my chart because I probably can do it quickly. I did find the switch to switch it to south, but I can't get them both up here, so I'm going to kind of go back and forth. Again, this I did find the switch, although now it's not showing up. So I'll show you how I do this. Now, it did take me a while. Change charts on page to south. Okay, there we go. Pinari did it, okay? It only took me 3 weeks. And I can do my chart in the south. I don't know. So again, the south, shows Scorpio rising. The south shows the fixed sign. So again, I'm Scorpio rising. So one of the things that we have to look at is this chart down here, the nakshatras. So this tells me where all my nakshatras are, who the lord of the nakshatra is, and then we're not going to pay attention to this section, but it also, this is the nakshatra number, and then it tells us what pada it's in. So at some point, when you really start understanding the 108 padas of the zodiac, the difference between pada 1, pada 2, pada 3, and pada 4 are, give us a lot of information. We're going to put up the Navamsha chart here. I'm Virgo rising in the Navamsha chart. Okay, so let's just kind of go through. I know most of you know this basic stuff, but let's just go through it. Let's go through all my planets. So my rising sign is Scorpio. I'm at 7 Scorpio. So I'm in the constellation of Anuradha, which is ruled by Saturn. Anuradha is a very pure nakshatra. It's connected to service. It's connected to deep levels of spirituality. The deity is Mitra, very kind of friendly, beautiful nakshatra. It likes to create spiritual groups. My Saturn is in the second pada, which would be, the first pada is going to be Taurus, and the second pada is Gemini. So I have Saturn and Gemini Navamsha. So when we look in the South Indian chart, you see I have Saturn and Gemini, and that's pada 2. So now that tells us something about my Saturn. It tells us something about my Saturn. Now, so one of the 2 or 3 things that we look most at when we look at nakshatras is we want to look at the rising, the sign for the nakshatra that the rising sign is in, which is Anuradha, the nakshatra that the moon is in the Vedic astrologers always pay attention to that one. And in that case, mine is Jeshta, which is ruled by Mercury. That's the one connected to Indra, ruler of the gods. And I'm in the third pada of Jeshta, nakshatra number 18, again, 9/18/27 for Mercury. And I'm in the third pada, which is, if you go up to the moon's in Aquarius Navamsha. Okay, so that's the third pada. And the moon ends up being in my 6th house. So we'll learn a lot more about Navamshas next week, but there's a lot of meaning. So my moon starts out in Scorpio, and it goes into Aquarius. So it actually gets a little bit better as I get older in life and as I get married. But it's still debilitated in the natal chart. Now, so the nakshatras that you want to look most at are the moon's nakshatras, the rising signs nakshatras, and then the nakshatra of the dasha lord. And the dasha lord is, I'm in a Rahu period, and so my dasha lord is in, Rahu's in Mula Nakshatra. Mula is one of these dreadful nakshatras. It's actually, the 3 nakshatras that are most challenging are usually Ashlesha, Mula, and Ardra. And so I have my Rahu in Mula's nakshatra, which is owned by Ketu. You can see the Lord here is Ketu. So, so the 3 things, again, we can't do every single nakshatra, but what I wanted to share with you is, so what we know is that Saturn is the ascendant is connected to Saturn, and my Saturn is in the 12th house, which gives me an orientation toward meditation and being interested in moksha. And it also gives me a lot of expenses, as I explained. It also can make me a little bit fearful. The exalted retrograde Saturn tends to be a little bit more fearful. What we can say is that we want to look at the fact that my rising sign, my rising nakshatra lord, is in the 12th house. So that connects my ascendant with the 12th house. So even though my ascendant lord is really Ketu in the 8th house, which makes me the astrologer and the ascetic, or secondarily it's Mars in Aries, making me a healer, which is also true. Um, 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 my mental nature is most governed by Saturn in the 12th house. So the rule that I want to share with you here, and I didn't put this on the slide, is that look at where the Lord of the rising signs Nakshatra is placed, and that will give you a lot of hidden information about the person's mental nature. So in my case, I have a strong orientation toward 12th house activities, meditation, finding moksha. First question I ask my first astrologer is when I'm going to get enlightened. Look at this. What am I interested in? The ascendant lord of the nakshatra is in the 12th house. It's interested in meditation and moksha, and most of my early life was about spirituality. If you weren't a good astrologer and you just said, oh, this chart is Mars and Aries, you'd say I'm a good athlete, I kick butt, maybe I'm a good healer, I'm good at defeating my enemies, but that wouldn't really describe who I am, because we're not, we can look at that information, but it's not as important as the rising nakshatra lord. So look and see where the rising nakshatra lord is placed. It's in the 12th house. And then we can also see what nakshatra it's in. Okay, Saturn is in Vishaka nakshatra. Okay, Vishaka is owned by Jupiter. Jupiter, Vishaka is a kind of funny nakshatra. It's connected with, it's an outcast, which means it's an outsider. It likes to think outside the box. It doesn't like to play by the rules. So immediately it's kind of at odds. Saturn is conservative and wants to play by the rules, but the nakshatra lord that it's placed in is Vishaka, and Vishaka is. Let me read you a little bit something about it. Not abstract. Vishaka is. Well, it tends to create people who are actually bartenders, models and actresses, people involving speeches, television broadcasters, connected to ideological fanatics, religious fundamentalism, things like that. Interesting. Prostitutes, interesting. But, you'd have to color a lot of the information, but Vishaka is a little bit of an outsider, so because it's my rising constellation, it means that I'm a little bit of a rebel. When we get to the 4 aims of life, the 5 aims, the five dharma types, I do have a lot of rebellious qualities. I'm not a conservative Jyotishi. I mean, I am not quoting Parashara to you in my classes. I'm not quoting Vedic Hindu scriptures to you, because I'm trying to think outside of the box with Jyotish, and that comes across, in my rising nakshatra. It gives me an outsider quality. So the second thing you want to look at is where the moon is placed. Okay, then we said the moon's nakshatra is the most important one. And in this case, the moon is in Jyeshtha nakshatra, and Mercury is in the 4th house. So we said, so the nakshatra lord of Jyeshtha, again, is Mercury. So where's the nakshatra lord placed? Mercury is in the 4th house. The 4th house is the house of happiness. Remember, if you took my class last semester, Mercury doesn't like being in the 7th or the 4th house. The 4th house is the place of happiness, and Mercury is always thinking, why am I not happy? Aquarius, the sun is one of the signs of the zodiac, which tends to create a lot of suffering. It creates a deep search for God, makes one very philosophical, because there's a lot of suffering that goes with anything placed in Aquarius. So my Mercury's in Aquarius, and it's what we can say is that Mercury is so my moon is connected with Mercury. So on a mental level, I tend to analyze my emotions. So my moon in Mercury's nakshatra makes me very mental. I mean, if you were looking at this chart, Scorpios are kind of emotional creatures. I got moon in the 1st house, but I'm really kind of a very mental, intellectual creature. And that certainly comes across because Moon is in Mercury's Nakshatra. So my mental nature colors the moon, colors the mind, and makes it very analytical. And it also kind of has a very kind of questioning mode. Why am I suffering? And so then we might look at where is Mercury placed in the Navamsha chart. Okay, so Mercury is in the third house in the sign of Scorpio, and again, it's Virgo rising. Mercury's in the sign of Scorpio, and Mercury and Mars are exchanging signs. It's a part of our yoga. So Mars is in Virgo, Mercury sign, and Mercury is in Mars sign of Scorpio. So they're exchanging nakshatras. So there's a strong connection between Mercury and Mars in my chart, which will create kind of a fighting kind of energy, a kind of debating, kind of aggressive energy, sometimes fighting people, which does come across a little bit, not as much anymore, but it certainly will come out in a Mercury period or a Mars period. But Mercury in Scorpio and Navamsha, again, Scorpio, if we remember from our class last semester, is the other most karmic sign connected with deep suffering, eighth house, deep psychological churning. So this moon in Gestia is a kind of a very kind of deep psychological, metaphysical kind of constellation, connecting it to Mercury and then connecting it to Scorpio and Aquarius in my chart, brings out, there's a lot of, I got into astrology. Mercury owns the Lord of the eighth house in my chart, right? It's the house of the occult. It's also a moksha house. I got into astrology because, why am I suffering? Why am I unhappy? Mercury in the fourth house isn't happy, connected to the eighth house, astrology. So by going deep into astrology, Jupiter aspecting Mercury, I'm able to kind of, understand my suffering and transcend it, and that's kind of what's happening. So the third thing that we want to look at is the Dasha Lord. So the Dasha Lord, we can look at any of the planets, and we really can do a lot with this. We really could spend a whole hour on this, and we may. The third thing we look at is the Dasha Lord. And so Rahu is in the constellation of Mula, and Mula is connected to Ketu. So one of the things I mentioned in the tape is that the real nature of the Dasha period is connected to the nakshatra that it's in. And this is one of the hidden things that they don't teach you in beginning astrology. So whenever you're doing somebody's chart, you look at what nakshatra the Dasha Lord is in. So my Rahu period is not about ambition. It's connected to Ketu. And where is Ketu? Ketu is in the eighth house with Jupiter. Ketu is, again, an ascetic. So Rahu is ambitious, but Rahu is in Ketu's nakshatra. Ketu is an ascetic. He wants to go off and meditate and leave the world. So what's happening in my Rahu period is I'm stuck between being ambitious and being in business and being out in the world and just wanting to go meditate and teach astrology and meditate all day. And it's taken me 7 years even to get a handle and clear that energy so that I could actually function in the world, because I'm just ready to just leave the world. But if you don't look at the nakshatra that the Dasha Lord is in, you would completely misinterpret the chart, And the accurate interpretation of what's going on is that my mental nature, my emotional nature is all about Ketu. I have some outward Rahu energy, Rahu in the second craves money, it craves attention from family, it craves good food. I mean, all those things, I have food addictions going on now. So those things are happening on an outer Rashi level, but on an emotional inner level, Ketu is dominating and wants to leave the world, go off and meditate. It's in a moksha house. It's in the eighth house. Okay, so I did me. I'm going to do a quick practice on some of your charts. I might not be able to do them as quick.
Barry, I had a quick question about your chart. So you mentioned that you know the moon is in Mercury's nakshatra, and that sort of gives you an analytical frame. And we look at Mercury and we see it's in Dhanishta, so it's in Mars. But doesn't this become a kind of infinite regress? Because then don't we have to see where Mars is? And I see that Mars is in Bharani, and so then do we have to look at Venus and so on? You
Yes,
know?
no, you're way ahead of me. Now, this is what I wanted to teach you today, and then I'm almost a little bit shy to do it. There's a thing, and I did mention it in the tape. Um, there's this thing called, what I call it, no one really talks about it. It's kind of I would call the Nakshatra matrix. You've all seen the movie The Matrix. I call,
Hmm.
um, I actually, again, I'll probably do a whole lesson on this in my Nakshatra class. You actually do have to trace all the nakshatras. So you're right. The moon is in Mercury's nakshatra, and Dhanishta is connected to Mars. So there's a connection between healing, sixth house, Mars and Aries, and the fourth house. It also has created, um, you know, there's a connection between my fourth and my sixth house through the nakshatra. Where that's manifest is that when I'm in a Mercury period, I get into problems with landlords and mortgage companies because Mercury, um, fourth house is home. Mercury wants Mars. Mars and Mercury are fighting. Mercury and Mars' nakshatra creates fighting. So what am I fighting about? Stuff connected to fourth house. That's either problems with vehicles, problems with homes, problems with mother, which is my mother's dead now, but um, so there's a connection whenever I go into Mercury period to Mars in the sixth house, which is connected to kind of fighting. But I win my battles. I've had whenever I'm in a Mercury period, I've had some huge battles with landlords. And I've won, but they've been very draining because Mars in the sixth in Aries is going to win, but I'm going to have to go through something. Or I had a car accident in a Mars Mercury period. Again, you can see the connection 4 and 6. So you want to connect, yeah, and you can go, yeah, right. Mars is in Bharani Nakshatra. You can see it down here. Bharani is also an outsider, so that again is the second planet. My Atmakarka, Saturn, is the planet of my soul, is an outsider. My Mars is in Bharani Nakshatra, which is associated with the outsider cast. So it does make me an out-of-the-box person. Mars then connects to Venus. Venus in the third. Um, so part of your homework actually will be to kind of trace your nakshatras around the zodiac and talk about them. It will take a lot of time, um, but they're all connected. And then what happens sometimes is they all come back to some place. Venus is in the moon's nakshatra, moon is in Mercury, so there's kind of a loop here that stops.
Right.
Yeah, but sometimes you get these loops that are kind of problematic. So Rahu's in Ketu's nakshatra, Ketu's in Rahu's nakshatra. They keep going back and forth between the second and the eighth house. What do I do? I'm a financial astrologer, right? The connection between money and astrology. Now I'm a spiritual astrologer. Connection between, um, Ketu and astrology. But so you want to look for the loops and where the loop starts. Sometimes the final dispositor is Jupiter, and then that tells you something about the person because that becomes like kind of a core planet. But that's a really good question. It's something I talked about on the tape a little bit. I actually wanted to practice in all your charts. I'll show you how to do it. Let's practice a little bit with your charts, just and see what I can do with them. But again, a lot of this class does require you to kind of learn the principle and then go deep and do the homework and see how it shows up in your chart. And until you practice on your chart, you're not going to really know it. So let's look at some of your charts.
Thanks, Barry. That was very helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. It's actually a fascinating thing if you learn this. I mean, I have friends who can do this deep psychological analysis of somebody's chart based on all the connections in the nakshatras. And they could do like a deep psychological analysis like you wouldn't believe, which is what you're trying to do when you're analyzing patients. You can see it in the mental connections in the Nakshatras. Again, the Nakshatras are showing the mental connections. And if you can learn and practice how to do this, you can come up with amazing things. Sometimes you can just come up with predictive things, but sometimes you can come up with, for example, one of the things I would say is because Moon is in Mercury's Nakshatra, analyzing your emotions is not really a good thing to do, because if you're a psychologist, you tell people they just have to feel. You just have to feel emotions and move through your emotions. When you analyze them, you get stuck in your head, and you never get through the emotional catharsis. It's a problem. You see. So I mean, you can look at any chart and see these things. Let's go to some of your other charts, because I don't want to talk about me too much. It's easy for me to talk about me, so that's why I did me first. I'm not that obsessed. Okay. So let's go to Pinar, since we have the South Indian chart up for her, so she can see her own chart. Okay, so no, I think we have the right chart. Libra rising, right? Venus is the chart lord. So the first thing we want to look at is that the chart lord is in Vishaka Nakshatra, and so the rising sign is in a Jupiter constellation, again making one connecting one to teaching and counsel. She also has Jupiter in the first house, so there's a wonderful connection between the first house and Jupiter in the first house. That gives, Jupiter in the first house is just a wonderful quality to have for relationships and being good in relationships, particularly in the sign of Libra. They are in different nakshatras. Jupiter is in Swati Nakshatra, which is one of the more materialistic nakshatras, which doesn't have, it's just part of, it's a Tamasic nakshatra, meaning it's a material nakshatra. And we learned last week that Pinar did banking counseling and bank consulting, and that's the type of thing you'd expect when Jupiter is connected to Swati. Swati is owned by Rahu, and Rahu's in the fifth house, and we'll talk about we'll have to figure out what that means in a minute. But fifth house is the house of investment, or in this case, of speculative investment. Rahu is in its own nakshatra of Shatabisha. Shatabisha is, one of the nakshatras is connected to healing, and so when we look at the ascendant lord and we see it's connected to Jupiter, and Jupiter is connected to Rahu, and Rahu kind of stops there because it's in its own nakshatra, we see there's a connection between healing and counseling. So becoming a Jyotishi or doing healing work on a counseling level may be something that's very connected to your rising sign through your mental capabilities. The moon's nakshatra becomes very important. The moon's nakshatra is in Dhanishta, which is connected to Mars. Dhanishta is one of the constellations which is actually it's the best Mars constellation. It's the Satwik Mars constellation. It tends to be good for money and music and that's why you have to memorize these things, because you want to immediately be able to say something meaningful about it to a person. I don't know if I can't remember. We'll have to look up. Somebody can look up the Shakti while I'm on the slideshow while I'm talking about Pinar. But so the moon's in Dhanishta, and Mars is in the second house from Dhanishta, and Mars is in the sixth house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, of all the planets, we usually like to see Mars in the sixth house. Mars is in Saturn's nakshatra, and Mars is connected to the debilitated Saturn here. Now we have to go to the Navamamshas chart. We've got Saturn in the first house in the Navamamshas chart in Gemini, like I do. That uplifts Saturn a little bit, but it still says that the inner being has to deal with lack of confidence in later life, even in their married life. With Saturn in the first house, it's a little bit Saturn in the first house is a very kind of difficult placement, because it tends to kind of create a little bit lower self-esteem, and So it's connected to Mars. So basically, Mars is channeling Saturn's energy, um, and Mars and Mars is in Pisces, and Saturn's Nakshatra. So there's a connection between Mars and Saturn here because Saturn is in Aries, Mars' sign, and Mars is in Saturn's Nakshatra. So there's kind of what's called a sambandha. There's an association between Mars and Saturn. It's on the mental level, and again, whenever you have Mars and Saturn connected, it tends to create indecision or frustration or kind of suffering. So in this case, because Saturn's in the 7th house, the house of relationship, and is connected to Mars in the 6th house, there's kind of a deep frustration and indecision and um, kind of suffering going on between connecting relationship. What are the 7th and the 6th connected to the Nakshatra? So, Pinar, do you want to say anything? Again, I don't know anything about you really. I'm going to unmute you. Do you want to say anything about how might that operate in your chart? Am I whistling in the wind here? We have to look at the Navamamshas chart too, but Saturn's in the 1st, aspecting the 7th here. The Lord of the 7th in the Navamamshas chart is Jupiter's in the 8th. So I mean, there's definitely some issues around relationship in your chart.
Yes, it is true, Barry.
Okay. But do you see what we found out? It's not, we're finding out that, yeah, there's a problem. Obviously, anytime we have Saturn in the 7th, we're going to have relationship problems. We're going to have deep suffering. But we see it's also mental suffering because it's connected to Mars and the exchange between Mars and Saturn. You know. That's an example how you can play with what we're trying to do sometimes is sometimes the physical level is working. We had Jupiter in the 7th in Aries. It could be, and we have Jupiter aspecting the 7th. So there's some good things about the relationship. You know, there's a willingness to kind of be accepting of the relationship. Jupiter wants to kind of conservatively go along with the relationship. But on the inner mental level, you know, there's some suffering there. But sometimes you can get something where the material world is wonderful, but the mental world is suffering, okay? And I don't have that example here. We'll see if we can find it in another chart. But that's really kind of an important thing to see because the person may have lots of money, but they may feel like they may have a horrible attitude toward it because the nakshatras are kind of pulling it down. So the nakshatras are revealing our mental nature. Now let's look at somebody else's chart. The Daniel's chart. Okay, so Daniel's rising nakshatra is ruled by Mars, Mrigashira, and Mrigashira is a kind of is a spiritual seeker. It's actually a very beautiful nakshatra. It's the constellation of Orion. It's nice to know the Western names. You know, I write them in my articles because I think it's for people in the Western world. It's nice to know. Orion's the warrior. And don't forget, Mars is winning a war. Is winning a planetary war with Mercury in this chart. They're both at the same degree. Sri Jyotistar says that Mars is winning the war. So again, the rising sign is Gemini. So on the mental level, the rising sign is connected to Mrigashira, to Mars, who's winning the war. So that gives you kind of a fighting spiritual spirit to kind of overcome obstacles in your life, because that's the value of Mars winning the world. On the material level, when Mercury is winning, losing a planetary war, you have to be careful about accidents and health, particularly if Mars is connected to the fire element. So if you let your fire element, the pitta element, if you go into a sauna and eat hot foods in the summer, you're going to lose it and get out of control. So anyway, so we're seeing now the rising moon sign, the moon's nakshatra is ruled by the sun. It's Uttarashada, which is in Capricorn, and it's in the 8th house. So moon, in general, moon in the 8th house, as you know, is a little bit troubling for having repressed emotions. One place you don't want the moon is in the 8th house because it creates kind of deep emotional and psychological. It puts the moon in the swamp. It is uplifted. Well, it isn't totally uplifted. It's connected to the sun, and the sun's in the 12th house. So there's a connection between the 8th and the 12th houses here because the moon is in the nakshatra of the sun, and the sun's in the 12th house. Now, the 12th sun in the 12th house is also a very troubling situation. So, I'm assuming that your relationship with your parents was pretty challenging and has created kind of deep emotional and psychological scarring. And certainly turning to astrology is one way of helping to understand yourself. But if you listen to my tape on the 12th house, which I just put online, Mysteries of the 12th house. The 12th house is this kind of deep unconscious level, and the sun in the 12th house has a problem in being seen and being noticed and having confidence to move into the world. Sometimes it can be okay, but so the connection between the moon and the sun in the chart, which are really important. Again, the moon and the sun. We learned about the importance of the moon and the sun last week. Now we see that there's kind of an emotional. The moon's connected to the sun in this chart, and the sun is connected to Mars. Again, the sun is in Mrigashira Nakshatra. So there's this kind of strong connection between Mars and the moon and the sun, and Mars is winning a planetary war, which means when Mars is winning a war, you are going to be victorious in your psychological search for wholeness and healing your relationship with your parents. Anyway, so that's that. Again, I'm doing this stuff off the top of my head. I could be completely wrong, but Daniel, you want to say anything about your emotional mental makeup?
Yeah, no, that's pretty spot on, to be honest. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm using these examples to show you what you can do with this. It's very powerful, and it's even more powerful if you start, including layers of the deities, again, if we include whether the person's a deva, a human, or a rakshasa, if we include the caste nature, you can get really deep with this stuff. That's why I sent you that Excel spreadsheet chart. And you could play with this forever. That's why I think I have to do a Nakshatra class in the spring, because, you really need weeks to kind of deal with this because it's so deep. And I just wanted to expose you. This is a survey cast. I wanted to expose you what you could do with it, but I also have a lot more to go with it. So I'm gonna, I will work on some of your other charts, but I'll do them later in the class for when we talk about Artha, Moksha, and Kama. Okay. So any questions on the Nakshatra matrix? So you're all going to study the matrix now. So part of your homework really should be charting your matrix, which is connecting the planets. How are all the planets connected? And how are the dispositors connected? And what you may come to is the fact that, you end up with the planet coming back to Mars. And luckily Mars is winning the planetary war, so it gives you the power and the strength and the courage to fight your battle. If Mars were losing the war, then you might just give up on your life. So, even though that planetary war looks pretty bleak, in the nakshatras we're seeing it's giving you a victory, or the potential for a victory, particularly if you go into a Mars period. Okay, so let's move on. So I'm just going to quickly go over this again. So the Rajasic quality is connected to action, desire, seeking fulfillment in the world. It's I want. When you think of Rajas, it's desire. I want. And the first 9 nakshatras from Aries through Cancer are connected with desire. They're Rajasic. the Tamasic Nakshatras, Tamasic gets a bad word. Sometimes it's connected with the world of sensuality, with material gratification, immediate gratification. Sometimes they can be lazy or selfish. But Thomas is connected with I want more and more and more and more. It's kind of a little bit like Rahu. It's just kind of like it wants to keep, it wants more and more and more on a material level. It's really not connected to sattva or purity, which is a person who is happy, who's aspiring towards spirituality, who's calm and collected and interested in love and fairness. It's not selfish like Thomas. So it's important to learn these gunas, and the nakshatras are connected to the gunas. So the first the first 9 nakshatras are Rajasic, I want. The second 9 nakshatras, which go from Leo through Scorpio, are Tamasic, they're more material. And the third group, which are the late ones, Sagittarius to Pisces, are Sattvic. That's easy to remember because you just have to remember the first 3 signs of the zodiac are Rajasic, the second 3 signs are Tamasic, and the third 3 are Tamasic, are Sattvic. I talked about this. I can't get into this. It's too much now. Can't get into this. We talked about the nakshatras. We talked about the house connections. So we've pretty much done this first tape now. The only thing that I'm going to talk about this in the next lesson. But let's, I think we made it through the first slideshow here, although it's endless. So I'm happy that we did that. So any questions on this first slideshow? I'm going to unmute you in a second, and then we'll go on to the second part, which to me is totally fascinating. Okay, so any questions? So the trick is the trick with the nakshatras is you've got to just remember that the nakshatra is like kindergarten now, A, B, C. You've got to make your flashcards. You just have to memorize it. If you don't memorize, you'll never get to use it because you'll draw a blank when you have to talk about somebody's revati, So you just, make the flashcards when you're stuck on the bus, when you're stuck, in traffic and, you can look at your flashcards. Just learn them, You'll be grateful that you spent that time. I guarantee you. They're totally everything in Vedic astrology. And we'll spend 8 weeks on nakshatras. There is so much there. They're so amazing. You see I write about them, every week. Every time we have a new transit into a new nakshatra, I'm telling you what it means. And it's quite fascinating. So again, we're getting deeper on the DNA. We talked about this at the beginning of the class. What we're moving toward in the rest of the class now is we're going to start spending a lot of time on life purpose analysis. So what I'm really wanting to do is to spend a lot of time on this question of, what's my purpose on the planet? And people come to us all the time to answer this question, and the answers are in the chart, but they're really kind of buried in the chart. And we can learn the superficial ways of interpreting it, which I'll show you, and then next week or the week after that, we'll learn the really deepest level of purpose of life in somebody's chart. And this comes up in Jaimini astrology, and it's totally amazing. But there are kind of multiple levels to life purpose in some charts, and we can see them in the nakshatras and in the Navamamshas chart. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is the nakshatra chart. I'm going to skip this. This is totally fascinating. If you buy Prash Trivedi's book, read the introduction. He does this amazing psychological analysis of the movement through the 27 nakshatras is the journey from birth to enlightenment. And he shows how each of the nakshatras is connected to that journey. And I'm going to write an article about this. It's so fascinating because I think we're born into a certain nakshatra. And so what happens is when we move through that nakshatra, like if we're born into a Rajasic sequence, let's say if our moon is in the early part of Aries or Taurus, our cycles are going to go through the Rajasic dashas, which means we're going to be more connected to being active in the world, creating our desire energies. If we're born in the Sattvic nakshatras, and in fact I was born at the end of the Tamasic nakshatra, so all my cycles now are connected to Sattvic nakshatras, which means they're connected to Sattvic periods. So I don't know if anybody has really talked about this, but I was just seeing this today. I started my life in Jestya, a place where pride and superiority sets in, the culmination of materialization where superiority sets in. So that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's moon's in Jestya. It's why people hate Donald Trump so much. Pride and superiority sets in. They can't stand that kind of arrogance of Jestya. Jestya then moves to Mula. What happens in Mula is that Mula crushes whatever we have built so far and shows us there's a lot more to unravel and to understand. Mula is connected to Ketu. So one of the things that I talked about briefly in the first tape is that the constellation that you're born in leads to the unfoldment of the periods connected to the nakshatras in that order. So in my dasha class, if you took that, so I was born into Jestya, moon. So my Mercury, I was born into a Mercury period. So my Ketu period was then connected to the second nakshatra after Jestya, which is Mula. And my Venus period was connected to the third period, which is third nakshatra, is Purvashada. So the sequence that you're born in will unfold the nakshatras. So it's quite fascinating. So depending on where you're born, it will give you an emphasis in your life of more materiality, desire nature for ambition and achievement, or towards sattva. And I'll write an article about this. It's quite fascinating, but it's very powerful. So what I wanted to do today is we went over this whole thing as where's the Lord of the nakshatra place? What sign, what house is the planet afflicting it? What house does it own? What nakshatras are connected to it? So we practice a little bit on that. We have to keep practicing on that. And you have to remember that, if you're a superficial astrologer, somebody says, oh, I have moon in Libra, you might say, oh, you're an amiable, harmonizing person. Well, that's true if they're in Swati Nakshatra, but if they're in Vishaka or Chitra Nakshatra, which are also in Libra, they're a different person. So it's very important to know the different nakshatras. We talked about the most important nakshatras to look at in a person's life are the moon nakshatra, the ascendant nakshatra, the dasha lord nakshatra, the Atmakaraka nakshatra. We didn't talk about that, but we haven't talked about Atmakarakas too much. If the person has a lot of nakshatras connected to Saturn, then they have a lot of karma. What we learned in the last class is that Saturn is connected to past life summary. So if you find somebody who has 4 or 5 planets in Saturn nakshatras, they're channeling a lot of Saturn energy. They have a lot of Saturn energy, even if they have good placements, like they have Jupiter in the 5th house exalted or something. Maybe it's in Pusha and it's in the 12th house or something. There may be a lot of past life suffering there. So you have to kind of really see what's dominant in the chart. For example, I have 3 Jupiter nakshatras. 3 of my planets are in Jupiter's nakshatras, so that gives me a lot of Jupiter in my life. 3 out of the 9 planets are in Jupiter's nakshatras. If you have like 5 of the 9 planets in Saturn's nakshatra, the person has a lot of Saturn. So look at where the nakshatras are placed. It tells you something about the person. Are they Venus? If there are a lot of Venus nakshatras or a lot of benefic nakshatras, Jupiter, Venus. Person has a lot of Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury nakshatras, then they have a lot of sattva in their life. They have a lot of benefics underlying their mental thinking area. If they have a lot of Mars nakshatras or a lot of Saturn nakshatras, there's a lot of malefic influence on their mental energy. They think negatively, right? If they have a lot of Rahu nakshatras, then they have a lot of Rajas nature, a lot of ambitious energy, a lot of past life karma. If they have a lot of Ketu nakshatras, then they have a lot of, spiritual energy. They're very connected to moksha and meditation. This is kind of a summary of the article on that I sent you on by Hank Friedman on Nakshatras. I'm kind of gone over a little bit. You can read it again. He does a good job going over it. But basically, this is a little bit deeper about the nakshatra lords, right? If they're in planets in ruling bad houses or poorly placed, are going to create problems. And if they're in good houses, then the nakshatra is going to do better. And we'll have some examples here. I think we should go to the examples. So here's Arnold Schwarzenegger's chart. And Hank Friedman points out that the rising sign, which is the lord of the chart, and Mercury are in Purnavasa Nakshatra, which is owned by Jupiter. And Jupiter is well placed in the fifth house in its own nakshatra, right? Fifth house is connected to, what would we say, acting, right? One of the fifth house characteristics is recreation. Theater is one of the fifth house characters. So he's got the planet of luck in the planet in the sign of Libra, which is kind of an arts sign, and he's got it in the nakshatra, in his own nakshatra, which is an outsider nakshatra, Vishaka, and Mercury is, so Mercury and the ascendant lord are very well connected to Jupiter in the fifth house. It tells you a lot about him. So in this case, there's a lot of positive yogas. Obviously, Mercury and Gemini. The first house is a very powerful yoga. The connection to Purnavasu. Purnavasu is connected to the ultimate mother. If you have to learn key words. Purnavasu is connected to the universal mother, to the universal nurturer, the one who nurtures and takes care of children. And it's interesting, the kind of some of the movies he was in, like Kindergarten Cop or whatever that movie was. He kind of plays kind of this kind of universal mother figure. I mean, they cast him pretty well. If a planet is in a really dreadful nakshatra, it can create really problems. I think the three most difficult nakshatras are Ashlesha, Mula, and Ardra. Again, we're going to have Saturn going through Mula in the fall for about a year, and that's kind of a really interesting nakshatra for transformation. Ashlesha, we have Rahu transiting into Ashlesha in September for a year and a half. For another year and a half, it'll be 6 months. That's going to be kind of interesting. Ashlesha is connected to poisons, so in transit, pollution and toxins and probably some major toxic pollution scandal will come out with that transit. But you have to kind of know the nakshatras because they tell you a lot about the qualities of the transits. But sometimes they can be positive. I mean, you can actually have stuff in Ashlesha and Mula and Ardra, and because the rulers are well placed and Kendras are connected to Jupiter or something, it can be positive. Here's one of the books that I've recommended for the class is Bill Levity's book, Beneath the Vedic Sky, and he gives you the positive and negative qualities of each nakshatra on pages 205 to 223. So if we're looking at Ashwini, the first constellation of the zodiac, it's owned by Ketu. So if Ketu is well placed, I have a friend who's got Ketu in Gemini as connected to Jupiter, and she does have all these qualities: good, steady worker, honorable living, competent, does above average work, intelligent, reliable, self-sufficient, Good with finances, lighthearted, gives upliftment and healing energy to others. Ashwini is the healer. Spiritual tendencies, modest, moderate habits. Now, this perfectly describes my friend, who obviously has a very positive placement of Ketu. And so the favorable aspect of Ashwini comes out. Now, if Ketu were debilitated in the sign of Taurus, and maybe in somebody's, third house, Ketu, fourth house actually, Ketu hates being in the fourth house, then the dark qualities might come up, because the person to be too naive, wanting to do things their own way too much, stubborn, being a zealot. Again, the opposite side of a spiritual person is a zealot, a religious heretic, right? Wild and racing around like horses. Ashwini is, is the quick out of the gate racehorse. That's how I always remember Ashwini. It's the quick starter. If you get stuff in Ashwini, they just do things right away. They're just really quick. But the dark side of that, the unfavorable side, is too wild, racing around like a crazy person. So look at whether the planet is strong or not strong. I think I have Bob Dylan here, which is an example of a negative placement. So Bob Dylan, this is the example that Hank Friedman brings up. He's got a poorly placed planet of the Nakshatra. So the ninth Lord Moon, Bob Dylan is a Scorpio rising. He's got a waning moon in the sixth house. Let's look at his chart. Bob Dylan, as you know, is a famous folk artist, got the Nobel Peace Prize for music last year. A great folk singer. His moon, he's got a Scorpio. He's got an Aries moon conjunct Saturn. It's a waning moon because look where the sun is. The sun is in Taurus. The moon is 12 from the sun, so that means the moon is going to have a new moon in Taurus, and so he was born a day. So he's got a very weak moon. The moon's in the sun's nakshatra. The sun's in the moon's nakshatra here. But the point is that the moon's in the sixth house, and during his moon period, he had a very difficult time. His father died of polio, and it was a very kind of emotionally difficult period for him. You'd expect that. Moon in the sixth with Saturn and the nakshatra Lord connected to Kritika, which is a very kind of harsh, cutting nakshatra, is in the seventh house. Sun in the seventh doesn't do that well. The sun is hemmed in by benefic, so one would think that he, even though he lost his father, that somehow his father was a good person. I can't do too much here. I'm going to get into the dharmas. So the whole purpose of this lesson, which I now only have a half hour to do, is, and we can continue it next week, is on the 7 castes and the 5 dharmas. Dharma is asking the question, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose on the planet? And people ask this question all the time. And without Dharma, there is a series of random moments ungoverned by any sense of natural order. And you have some people who come to you and they have their life is chaos. They have no idea what they're supposed to do with their life. They're just wandering all over the place searching. And, we talked about the last couple of weeks when the sun is when the ascendant lord is poorly placed, or the moon and the sun are not very strong, then, the person is definitely having more problems in their life. They're kind of, why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? It's just these random moments. I had a chart yesterday that I did where the person is an incredibly gifted writer and poet, but her ascendant lord is in Virgo in the 12th house, and Libra rising Virgo in the 12th house, and she just doesn't have any sense of what she's supposed to do in life, and yet she's very talented. And we learned that principle last week. When the Rashi Lord is poorly placed and not very strong, they don't have good judgment. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So why am I here is Dharma. And Dharma is a person's archetype. It's like our internal software that runs the computer. In the Rashi, now it's important to understand this is where we start moving into the Navamsha chart. In the Rashi chart, the Dharma houses are 1, 5, and 9. And I actually, the Artha houses, which are created with the material world, are 2, 6, and 10. So that's money, everyday work, and status. And so that's the material world. The water houses, which are connected to moksha, are in the Rashi chart are the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th. And the fire houses, which are connected with the warrior, the protector of society, like policemen and firemen, are the Dharma houses, and they're connected to, actually I did that already. The Dharma houses are 1, 5, and 9. And then the Kama houses, which are connected to relationship, providing service, and communicating, are the air signs. So that's like the natural third sign. So they're 3, 7, and 10. And this also explains why you have the natural signs of the zodiac like that. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, is a fire sign. It's connected to protecting society. Taurus, the second sign of the zodiac, is an earth sign. It's connected to, it's the most material of the zodiacal signs, right? Gemini, an air sign, is connected to communication and providing service. It's the third house, the natural third sign of the zodiac. So you can do this, in 2 different ways. Just Aries to Pisces, which you always have to remember. You can also do it, just first house, second house, third house. So here are the 4 aims of life. This is very profound stuff. It's called Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And the acronym for that is DAKM, D-A-K-M, DAKM. So you can remember those, okay? And Kama, we think of the Kama Sutras. Everybody knows about the Kama Sutras for all the sexual positions that you can be romantically involved in. And the Kama houses, again, are 3, 7, and 11. And Kama is not just sexual or romantic. It's about pleasure and enjoyment. And on the most spiritual level, it's about playing with the Lord. So Krishna is the perfect example of Kama. I mean, he was just all about play. He was renowned for playing with women too, but he was also a very kind of playful, mischievous character, very kind of comic character. Going through an art museum is kind of a Kama experience. It's dealing with pleasure. Eating wonderful food is a Kama experience. So Kama is all about pleasure, not just about sex, but it's all about pleasure in life. Moksha is about, it doesn't just govern enlightenment, but it's about education, knowledge, teaching, reading, and writing. So moksha, if you have planets connected to the 4th, 8th, and the 12th house in the Rashi chart or the Navamsha chart, those are the moksha houses, which are about education, knowledge, teaches, reading, and writing. I'm an academic, so I have a lot of moksha energy because it's very connected to those houses. Dharma is kind of been misunderstood for centuries. It does mean also helping people, which can be altruism, having strong ethics, being very righteous. So being in one's dharma is doing the right thing for yourself and for the world, and upholding. Good word for dharma is to uphold creation, being righteous. It's connected to the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses in the Rashi chart and then the Navamsha chart. And Artha, which does not just mean wealth, it also means power, influence, fame, and reputation. So the 10th house is the house of status, the 6th house of everyday work, and the 2nd house of accumulating wealth. Wealth being food and family, your storehouse. 2nd house is storehouse. It's not just wealth; it's storing food, storing savings, that kind of thing. Artha is more than wealth; it's power, influence. So the question is, and you can take a survey, and we'll go through and see if you can figure out who you are. I put together a list of the most strong qualities of the caste interest. So we have Brahman, which is the educator, which is connected to the moksha, right? And it's connected to water signs, Cancer, um, Pisces, and Scorpio. And it's connected most to Jupiter and Venus, and probably Ketu also. Ketu is the priest. I think I wrote in Ketu. It didn't come out here. I don't know what happened. So if the key word that most describes who you are is wisdom, then you most identify with the educator, the Brahmin. It's kind of worldliness and knowledge that drives you. I mean, this is me. I have cravings for money because of my Rahu in the second house, but my real love and my drive in life is always more knowledge. I have 16 years of college. I got a PhD. I'm still studying Jyotish, at the age of 62 because I still want more knowledge. So knowledge kind of drives me. Brahmins kind of want to be alone for quiet contemplation and rejuvenation. They tend to want to teach their family to improve themselves. They urge their kids to think for themselves and understand the world. In religion, they value and study scriptures, so they may be more conservative in that respect. In marriage, they value a sensitive and intelligent spouse. For entertainment, which is going to be fifth house, they're drawn to watching knowledge-related programs like documentaries, educational, thought-provoking programs, the stuff that's like on PBS in the U.S., the National Geographic Channel, that kind of stuff. Under stress, they tend to be wishy-washy, feckless, and scatterbrained. So that's what happens when they get afflicted. At best, the educator does well as a counselor, a coach, a teacher, and a diplomat. I mean, that's what their dharma is, their purpose. The educator type also prefers intellectual work to hard labor. I mean, when you think of college professors, I used to be a college professor, the thought of actually having to go out and work as doing physical labor was really important to me because I just wanted to spend all my time in the library and reading books. I focused on philosophy rather than living in the real world, and that's the problem with academics, the ivory tower kind of situation. Brahmins just like injustice, but they don't have any energy to change anything, and that's true. I'm very radical in my politics. I read a lot, but I don't really get out there and protest. I don't even, I'm not an activist in that respect. I'm smarter than my peers, but I'm not always practical. I counsel others, but I don't always practice what they preach, which is also true of Brahmins. They're very good. Sometimes we're not good at doing what we tell others to do, but Brahmins are good counselors. I have a knack for finding the best people and others coming to me for advice. I like to live in a peaceful environment rather than the hustle bustle of everyday life. Now, I live in a town of 10,000 where 5,000 people meditate. Everybody's into Vedic knowledge. And it's like an ashram here. And I choose to be here because I need peace around me. I don't like the big city. I don't want hustle and bustle. I know Brahmins know what to be done, but do not have the energy or skills to do it. Again, sometimes I'm kind of a good leader for my company, but I don't always have the energy to kind of get all these things done, and I get drained when I have to do too much. Again, the last.
Barry, I had a quick question. How do we? How do you decide if somebody is a Dharma Brahmin educator type? Is it the position of the moon, or what is the criteria that you sort of?
Well, that's what the next 3 lessons are about.
Right.
So what we have to do is we have to start understanding the types, and then we can start figuring out how to talk about them in somebody's chart. And the answer is that it's like Ayurveda. We're kind of mixed, There's some pure examples. You will find charts where somebody has like a pure example. They just, they're an academic, they're on a Fulbright scholarship, they're paid just to do research, they want to be alone all the time, they just love writing papers for their knowledge, and they're not in the world. But usually you get kind of, I'm a mixed person, I'm a I'm a Brahmin, I love teaching, I'm a coach, I'm a counselor, but I'm in business. I have a financial consulting business, and so I'm kind of a mixture. So people most people are, if you look at my slides ahead, you'll see most people are kind of a mixture, and there's not a lot of pure examples. But what I want you to think about is there is kind of an ultimate pure Dharma example. And when I look at my life, since the age of 20, I've always been involved in teaching and education. I've been teaching meditation since I was 20. I was a college professor in my 20s and 30s. I've been a counselor, in my business. I've been teaching astrology. So my life has always been about teaching. And when I look at everything in my life, and when we look at my chart, there's a hidden way to find the ultimate Dharma in somebody's chart. It's Jupiter. It's Jupiter. I really am a Brahmin. But it's still not a pure Brahmin because I have Jupiter and Taurus in the Navamamshas chart. And so Taurus is an earthy sign, right? So, if I had Jupiter in Pisces, I might be able to be a priest, but I'm not, So it's always a mix, but this is a good example. Our whole lesson is about this, if we can get through it. So finally, the Dharma for the educator type person, the Brahmin, they're a cultured, mild-mannered person. They don't like to be vulgar behavior. They have special food regimes that require them to be alone and tend to be delicate in their constitution. That's absolutely me. They easily can get lost in a book rather than being in the world. That's absolutely me. They enjoy sports and games, but being in nature force inspirational value. So how many of you think you're Brahmins? Again, you haven't looked at all of them yet, but I'm just curious. You're educators.
I definitely feel an orientation to the Brahmin type, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? It's okay. We'll go through all of them. I just was curious. When I read all of these, I would say that I'm like 90% all of them. But there's some bleeding over, okay? So just see how you bleed over. We have to understand it eventually, okay? So then we go to the Kshatriya. Kshatriya are the warriors, the protectors of society. They're the fire signs are the Kshatriyas, right? Aries, Leo, Sagittarius in the Rashi chart. And then Mars and the Sun in Aries. Mars and the Sun, the fire planets. So those combinations. So if you get, Mars and Aries, in the first or something, maybe you get a pure soldier or a pure firefighter whose total job is just protecting society. He's a policeman, he's a fireman, he's a security guard, that kind of thing. But security guards aren't really even pure warriors, I think. They're really kind of warrior servants. I'll talk about that later. So the qualities of the warrior are: I treasure and I honor. I am disciplined and I have a need for protection. I do not like being alone as long as I have a goal to conquer. So again, fire signs, they're into goals. They want to do something. They're Rajas. They want to act. The fire signs have to act. Fire is about action. They have to conquer. In family life, I'm strong in my family, and discipline and respect and order are important in taking care of my family. If you're going to get beaten, you're going to get beaten by a Kshatriya because they just, we have to have discipline. You've got a military father. He is not going to withstand any misbehavior in his family, right? In religion, I value penance and discipline. Again, kind of, those kind of deeper values. In marriage, I like a challenging spouse who likes activity. So, Kshatriyas want to battle with their spouse. And you get relationships where you get spouses fighting with each other, and they're both Kshatriyas, and they love it. It's just part of their life. They love fighting. It's just what Mars does. It likes to fight. The problem is if you get two people who one likes to fight and the other doesn't, then you get a real problem, right? and in marriage, Kshatriyas like people, spouses who like to be active. They want to be doing sports together. Maybe, you'll see couples that, will play tennis together or go to sporting events together or do competitive recreation together. I mean, that's what Kshatriyas like to do. On TV, they like to watch sports, action, and adventure programming. Now, I have that I'm not a pure Brahmin. I have, I really like watching action and adventure programming. I mean, I don't like the gory battle military stuff, but I like spy stuff. I like, if it doesn't have a lot of action in it, I'm bored, and that's a Kshatriya quality that I have in my life. Under stress, I tend to be anger prone, inattentive, and reckless. At best, I'm a hero, risk taker, and leader. So Kshatriyas are, and they're often politicians. Kshatriyas are politicians too. So if you want to be a hero, if you want to take risks, if you want to be a leader, if you want to be a politician, you're a Kshatriya. Kshatriyas like to protect themselves and others, so they become security officers, guards, firemen, policemen, nurses, and doctors. They like to fight for social causes. So the people who get out and protest in the streets, they're the Kshatriyas. They want to fight to protect the world. They're like the military. They're going to get out and change the world. They have a lot of fire in them to change the world. Money is less important to the Kshatriya than social justice in the world. So for the Kshatriya, for the warrior, they want to change the world. They want to make it a better place. Politicians, a good politician really wants to create a better world, but most of them are on the take, and so they're lost in wealth. People look to leadership in Kshatriyas. So your CEOs are often, have a strong sun in their chart. They're leaders. They provide direction for action. At my best, I'm noble, self-sacrificing, courageous, but I can become anger-prone. So, I think those are really key words. Are you sacrificing for others? The policeman who goes in to save the child in the ditch, the fireman who goes into the burning house, the military person who's fighting for his country. Those are kind of really standard warrior positions, and we have fewer of them in our society, but they still exist. I admire wisdom, but I don't have time to study, is what the Kshatriya would say. Kshatriyas like to protect others, so actually nurses and doctors are Kshatriyas, right? They're kind of fighting disease. They're protecting people in the hospital. They're also very kind of Kshatriya positions. Kshatriyas have strong standards for themselves, and they expect to live up to them. They have strong ideals, and they live up to their ideals. They love competition, debate, and testing their limits, obviously. And Kshatriyas are fire signs, right? They have a big heart and they're very generous. If you look at people with Leo, a strong sun in Leo, they often have this huge heart and they're very generous because they have that fire. The fire of Leo is the heart. They have good. Kshatriyas often are keeping physically fit. If the people who are most going to the gym are probably the Kshatriyas, because they really value being in shape, because they have to be in shape to protect their family and their society, and they're the ones you'll find most at the gym. Not entirely, but of all the castes, they're the ones that are going to be at the gym. They play hard and they party hard. They care for I care for those who cannot take care of themselves, and so they can't have a nurturing quality like nurses. So that's the Kshatriya class. How many people think they're pretty much Kshatriyas?
I'm both Kshatriya and Brahmin because I like both things.
Okay. Like I said, most people are blends. It's kind of like you're Pitta Vata, Vata Pitta, right? So you're both. You're Kapha. In this case, you're Kapha, Kapha Pitta or Pitta Kapha. Which I am actually. I'm Pitta Kapha. So I kind of have those. The Brahmins are kind of like very Kapha, and the warriors are very Pitta, and that combination is kind of like the Brahmin warrior My favorite movie of all is The Mission, which got Best Picture a number of years ago, with Jeremy Irons in it. He plays the warrior priest. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a great movie. He's a Catholic priest, and then the Spanish come to take over Brazil, and he becomes this incredible warrior to fight for his religion. So I identify for that. That's the warrior priest. Okay, the merchant. Merchants are connected with kama, right? Merchants are connected with material wealth, with loving to enjoying pleasure. Air signs are very kama. I mean, it's Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius that are the kama signs. Again, the natural third, the natural seventh, the natural 11th houses of the zodiac, connected to Venus and Mercury, and sometimes Saturn a little bit. Saturn again is Aquarius. Aquarius to me is the one that I have trouble with, and we'll talk about that. Keyword for merchants is prosperity, right? You know, where's show me the money, right? Show me the money is if you think about money all the time, you're kind of a merchant. They're into entertainment and fun. They hate being alone, and they have to be with people. I mean, you know, of all the casts, you know, the merchants, you know, like to be with people. They have, you know, they can't stand being alone. Libras, think of Libras. They have to be with somebody. They have to do things together. I teach my children the value of money and making your way in the world. Again, they're kind of practical. In religion, they like rituals and observances. In marriage, they want a beautiful spouse. You know, that you get these people that when they marry for the beauty of their spouse, and they're not interested. I married my wife for her spiritual values. I mean, and I'm not a merchant in that respect. I was interested in her Brahmin qualities, that she's a very spiritual being. But you know, merchants may be interested in you know, my God, my spouse has to be beautiful. You know, entertainment. Merchants like to watch comedy, game shows, drama, and they're into music. Again, kind of the pleasure things. And Mercury is connected to comedy. Games are connected to Mercury, right? You know, the Jeopardy is a very mercurial game show. So merchant signs, Mercury, Gemini is very, very much connected to entertainment in that respect. Under stress, I'm moody, depressed, loud, and restless. I think that's very true. I think, you know, there's too much kapha. Merchants can have a little bit of a kapha imbalance sometimes. Put Jupiter and Venus or something in Taurus. Merchants are optimistic, self-starters, promoters, and adventurers. I think that's why they're good business entrepreneurial type people. Merchants also connected to the moon. I forgot to put that in the previous slide. I think the moon is very connected to merchants. They dream of owning their own business and being financially independent. They feel a need for providing for others. Now, I have a very strong desire nature like that. In business, I've been a businessman. My big thing has always been providing jobs for people. And I've had employees over the years. And that's a kind of a driving force in my life. So I do have this merchant quality in my life. Strong sense of value of money. We don't mind working long hours to provide for our family. We don't pay attention. Merchants don't pay attention to their body except for appearance in business. They show up for a business meeting. They have the impeccable suit, but they're not going to be the ones at the gym unless their doctor sends them there. You know, merchants can get overweight very easily because they can be more kapha and get imbalanced that way. They're competitive in providing for their family's needs. They're practical and taking care of mundane things. I mean, the good thing about merchants is they're very practical. They're very good at just really real practical down to life things. And they don't understand spiritual people. The merchant class and the Brahmin class are kind of at odds because one of the merchants are all about money and the spiritual people are about gods. And the merchant people can't understand the difference between, they're two different planets. Merchants, again, water element kind of dominant. That's why the moon and Venus are so important for merchants. I love attention and going to parties. I'm quick and clever and get along with others. I appreciate the finer things in life that are connected to beauty and value. Um, I feel, they love going to restaurants, they're going to art, art museums. Feel an inner emptiness without outside things. In other words, my wife has this too. If she doesn't buy something, she feels empty inside. That's that kind of Rajasic I want more kind of quality. I tend to be emotional and I can be depressed or elated, and I fill my void with alcohol, drugs, sex, or food. So merchant class can really kind of, when they have an emotional void, they can really get into addictive patterns. So how many of you think you're merchants in your purest nature?
I'd say
I
I've
think I'm a bit merchant type.
Okay. So Pinar, yeah, I would think so with,
Not completely, not all the, I don't show all the qualities, but I think I'm a bit merchant.
Okay, and I think I would agree from what we know about you. And again, I said just about nobody is a pure example. So we're looking at the archetypes, and then we're going to have to discern how to kind of really kind of decide how they fit in. But we have to know the archetypes first. Anybody else? Any other merchants in the class?
I could see lashings of that in myself as well.
Okay. And let's see, your rising sign is Aries, though, right? No, you're Leo. You're Leo. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have to see how that shows up in your chart. It's probably in the D9 chart someplace. Okay, the labor class, the Shudra. I'm giving you the Vedic words. So Saturn's very connected to Shudras. Mercury, the Earth signs are very connected to Shudras. So that's Capricorn, Virgo, and Taurus. The key word with Shudra is I love to serve. I'm devoted to helping others. I'm in service of others. People who take jobs in service professions where they're on the phone, customers or service helping others, they're doing their dharma because they love helping other people. Keywords, loyalty, love, and devotion. They don't mind being as long as they have something constructive to do. They're deeply bonded to their family and hard work to make sure they're well fed and healthy and content. When you think of, I think of laborers, I think of, the common people, Saturn, it's just the archetype of Saturn, hard work, devoted to family, faith and devotion to family and religion, marriage. They like the wives who cook and clean, and the man brings home the bacon. It's kind of that traditional family values. That's kind of the Saturn archetype. On TV, they like gossip shows, dramas, history, soap operas. They're much more kind of that way. Under stress, they can be lazy and shut down and worry a lot. Again, Saturn, what's the problem with Saturn when it gets afflicted? Lazy, worries a lot, shuts down. At best, I'm a devotee, friend, and caregiver. Again, Shudras, I love the camaraderie of working with others to construct something. Shudras make really good team members. If you have a team at work and you have a good leader and you get people who just like to be on the team and contribute to the team, that's a Shudra. My wife is like that. Shudras are naturally handy, skilled, and practical, not averse to hard work. Again, those are the people that show up as the electricians and the people who make service calls at your house. They're just very kind of into practical handyman skills, and they're really wonderful earthly people, and we have to love them for what they bring to us. They're devoted to their family, but they're not intellectual at all. They don't really understand Brahmins at all. They're very simple with their taste. They're not gourmets at the diner. They're just very simple with everything that they do. They're not pleasure seekers like the merchant class. They're just very simple. Again, Saturn has that simplicity. It doesn't take them much to make them happy. The nice thing about Shudras is, they can be very happy because they have a very simple life. They go to work, they come home, and they spend time with their family, and they're just happy. There's simplicity in Saturn in that way. Sometimes Shudras get very stuck in childhood beliefs. Again, Shudras, I'm a devoted, patriotic person. I love God and country. I believe in being devoted to my religion and country. I love to build community. I'm sentimental and a dutiful worker. Basically, I have to touch, see, hear, and feel something in order to know it's a real. They're very tactile. I work with a lot of farmers, which is something you probably don't know, and they're like that. I mean, I've had farmers had to come visit me before they would give me money for my consulting service because they had to see me in person. They're very kind of, they have to feel, they have to see something in person. They can't just, get a newsletter by mail, as an Artha person, laborers are very connected to creating the material world, and they create infrastructure. What does Saturn do? It builds bridges and highways. They provide the infrastructure that allows us to have an existence. How many of you think you're Shudras or laborers? Is that anybody here with that dominant quality? Okay, no takers on that one. Yeah, I wouldn't think so because, again, Shudras aren't drawn to intellectual knowledge or astrology, really. Okay, so the rest of you probably have a strong outsider quality. So let's look at the last one. There's a fifth dharma, which is called the outsider, the outcast. And there's the Vedic word is, I don't know how to pronounce it, is Micha. Tell me how to pronounce that, Sonara. How do you pronounce Michicha? How do you pronounce the?
Mlecha. I think it's Mleccha. Mlecha.
Mlecha.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know why it's misspelled in my book. Mlecha. Okay, so it means out.
No, the I is where the L is, and it's only one E. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, maybe I have misspelled. Okay, it means outcast. And outcasts in traditional Hindu society used to be shunned, but they have an important role in society in changing society. So Rahu is obviously very connected to the outsider. Aquarius is the sign of rebellion and freedom and independence. Uranus, we learned in Western astrology last semester, is connected to independence and freedom. And some of the nakshatras are outcasts. It's actually not all the Jupiter's nakshatras, but we'll look at those in a minute. Probably not today. Let's see if we can finish up the outsider. So the key words are freedom, independence, and bliss. They love to be alone. Sometimes people love me. Sometimes they hate me. Mostly they don't understand me. I lived in Sedona, which was just filled with people like that. They're very creative people. They're very independent people. And they sometimes tend to be by themselves a lot. They're not into community, and people don't understand them. They're often rebels. They're the black sheep in the family. I have Rahu in my second house. I'm the black sheep in my family. No one understands. I come from an Orthodox Jewish family. They're very conservative, and I can't talk about the fact that I'm involved in Vedic culture and do astrology because it's just I'm just foreign to what they do. In religion, they have to go their own way, and that's what's happened for me. I'm very much an outsider in my religious nature. I mean, I actually, I was born Jewish. I was involved in Catholicism. I've been in Vedic culture since I was 18. I love going to the Buddhist temple. I love them all. I mean, I'm just really not, married to the fact that I was born Jewish. In marriage, I value unconventional spouses who value my unique and particular desires. You get sometimes couples. I have a very kind of outsider marriage, which we can see in my chart. My wife is very unconventional. We're both very unconventional and independent. We're very unique, and we kind of get along because we value each other's uniqueness and we let each other be independent. We have a very outsider type marriage, which I can see in my chart, because Venus is in Shravana, which is an outsider cast. For TV, outsiders like to watch horror films, sci-fi, alternative political stuff, alternative channels. Outsiders like to bend the rules. They can be very self-deprecative. They're really hard on themselves. That's kind of Rahu and Ketu. At best, they're revolutionaries, inventors, and geniuses. Outsiders, I feel that that no one understands me or ever will. That's a no. People may see me as secretive or mysterious. I'm just different. I have a lot of outsider qualities, and you can see it in my chart. I have unrecognized talents that are unappreciated. I am attracted to foreign lands and cultures. Again, that's very Rahu. I can't conform to other lifestyles. Again, that's Rahu the rebel. I hate conservative social and religious institutions. Again, Rahu doesn't want to be conservative. I'm different. I see through others' bullshit. I want to overthrow the status quo. The rebels are the ones out with the Kshatriyas marching and throwing over the state. And they feel justified in flouting an unjust law. I mean, I have a bunch of friends. I have a lot of outsiders in my community, and they're always protesting. They were protesting the pipelines here in the United States when they were, hurting the South Dakota Native Americans. I had a lot of friends who went up there and chained themselves, to the fence and things like that. It's kind of interesting. How many? I'm sure we have. How many outcasts do we have and if you're all confused, it's because you're probably all a mix.
Well, Barry, it seems like there's that you have a little bit of all of these things. I mean, it's not like there's any, like definitely I feel the outsider fits me well too. So I mean, can you be like,
Yes, that's my whole point. Actually, is they're very pure examples. You find some.
Barry, a little outsider too.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Go ahead. Who's ever who?
I'm Pinar. Yeah, I also show most of the qualities of outsider.
Okay. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So one of the things that we'll learn next week is that sometimes the periods that we go through may bring out certain qualities in our life. Or so in other words, I'm in a Rahu period now. Okay, so I'm going to have a lot of outsider energy just because I'm in a Rahu period, right? If I'm in Aquarius period, again we'll learn about Rashi Dashas. In 2021, I go into an Aquarius period. My rebel is probably going to come out, and I'm going to probably protest, what's happening in the United States a whole lot more. But now I'm in a Pisces period, and Pisces is what? The teacher. He's in, and so I'm teaching Jyotish now. Pisces is into spirituality. So I think at different times in our life, when we look at our dashas and our Rashi dashas, there may be certain energies that come through, and then there may just be because the planets are in certain signs. Like I was looking at my chart, I've got Sun in my 5th house. Well, 5th house is recreation, so what kind of TV programs do I like to watch? I like to watch adventure. Sun is a warrior, right? So I've always been into hero comic books and things like that, and that's because the fire signs are connected to my 5th house. But I think there are different ways that different things can come out. But there is a way we'll eventually learn to look at your chart and say, okay, the dominant dharma in my chart is this. Now, I know my dominant dharma is Brahman because I've had, I know this technique. And it's because it's in the Navamamshas chart, which is what we're getting to next week. In the Navamamshas chart, if you look at the strongest relationships, you can see what's strongest. But sometimes you get a lot of mixes, So, but I think it's really useful to understand these archetypes because you can actually kind of help people a lot with them. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and take questions. It's 4:30. You can read through the rest of the slides and study them. I'll send you some new slides next week for the Navamamshas chart. But a lot of what I wanted to do in the Navamamshas chart first was to look at this idea of again this whole idea of here's an example. There's a slide here. Here's an example that my friend put this together. sometimes you have the sign and the planet as being primary, and then in the Navamsha chart, it shows up in a different way. And so here's an example of how you can get these kind of mixed caste natures, right? Brahmin, people who are pure scholars, researchers, professors, thinkers, Brahmin Kshatriyas, judges, lawmakers, legal advisors, lawyers. That's kind of an example, so you can see how when you look at people's careers, you often do get these kind of mixes, um, Shudra example of, unskilled laborers, people who are digging dishes, people who are kind of loading trucks, who are digging miners and beggars. I mean, so you can see the extreme examples, but, there's all these kind of mixes in between. It's quite interesting. Okay, so I kind of want you to, I'll see if I can send you some more articles on the Artha, Kama, Moksha, they're called the four Purushantas, the four ends of life, because I really want to spend a lot of time with that in the Navamsha chart, because I think it's totally fascinating and it's very revealing. And this is very hard to do, so that's why we almost have to spend 3 weeks at it. To really get to somebody's life purpose, we have to start at the Rashi chart, go into the Navamsha chart, and then look at the rotated Navamsha chart around their life purpose. And then when we kind of integrate all of them together, we can actually say something meaningful about somebody's confused purpose if they're not clear about it. Okay, final questions. So you're all inspired to make your Nakshatra flashcards now. I know you were all lazy. Mars is debilitated. My God, how he's going to make me study some more. But I'm just telling you, in a year, you're going to thank me if you make these flashcards and learn this stuff. It's just too much. There's 27 nakshatras. There's 27 deities. There's so many different factors. You've got to get your flashcards down, and then you can meaningfully pull them up when you're doing a reading. So definitely spend time on the nakshatras. And then I ask you for homework to maybe work on your nakshatra matrix. So just see how things are traced and see how maybe a mental quality is influencing a physical thing in your chart. And just play with it. It's very hard to do. We didn't really get to spend enough time on it today. If we do a nakshatra class, we'll probably have to spend 2 lessons on it because it's very deep. But if you learn how to do it, you can really do these amazing things with people's charts and your own chart. Okay.
I had a quick question. So these types, which you were just mentioning, it seemed that they're more, are these psychological profiles, or do they also go into the physiology?
Well, they're dharma types. We said at the beginning that dharma is kind of life purpose. Why am I here? What is my purpose? They're kind of archetypal psychological profiles that govern who we are. There may be a body type for them. I think Brahmins tend to have more kapha in them. Shudras connected to Saturn have more vata in them, right? Merchants sometimes have a lot of kapha in them. They're greedy. They hold on to things, right? Warriors are definitely very pitta, right? Because they have to have fire to move things, right? But as you know in Ayurveda too, there's these combinations: kapha pitta, pitta kapha, vata pitta, pure vata, pure kapha, pure pitta, So there is some connection between the doshas and the dharmas, but and I think it's important. You can do stuff with it in astrology, and we didn't even get to talk about caste because there's 7 castes. You can look at that for homework too. That's here, I think. Yeah, here there's 7 castes, and the caste system is outdated because it used to be it just doesn't work anymore because it's all mixed up now. But there are farmers. Farmers are kind of laborers, but it turns out they're all connected to Mars Nakshatra, the Mars Nakshatra, Mrigashira, Chitra, and Dhanishta, which are all in the earth signs, again, which makes sense. The farmers are connected to the earth, to growing. Butchers, which is actually a caste that's listed, is actually, they weren't really butchers in Vedic times. I mean, they were actually sacrificial priests. They're connected to Rahu and Ketu. Obviously, they were connected to the priests at the temple who made offerings for you to get rid of your karma. So the butcher caste is not like the meat market butcher. He's actually a priest, And then the outcast is we talked about is the person who changes society. They're in today's society the outcasts are ruled by Rahu, so they're the immigrants that are invading our society. They're the people with gay sexual orientations that are different and outside the normal traditions of marriage. So outcasts are a very important part of our society today too. But there are actually 7 castes. We focused on 5 of them. And the other 2 are kind of more tangential, but can show up. And we have to learn how to bring in the Nakshatras. And I had to do a lot of research to come up with an answer here. I mean, I asked, a bunch of my colleagues who know this stuff really well, and only one of them had any insight how to use caste, the caste of a nakshatra. All the books list it, but they don't tell you what it means, or how to use it. So I'll share that with you next week. So I'm always trying to get out of the box with Jyotish. So, if I don't ever teach boring, rule-oriented Parashara, typical Jyotish. I'm trying to teach radical stuff to move you outside of the box. Because I think that's what Jyotish needs. We need to kind of think differently if we're going to go deeper readings. So I'm the Jyotish rebel. Okay, my dears, anything else? Okay, have a great week. We'll see you next week. We'll finish up this lesson on the aims of life, and we'll start Navamamshas next week. Take care.